you. What are we talking about here tonight? Let me guess. Innovation. Isn't it great? I love innovation, and so do you. That's why we're here tonight celebrating it. And yep, there we are. We talked about global innovation. We talked about disruptive innovation. We've talked about social innovation. We've talked about technology innovation. We love to talk about innovation, don't we? Why is that, do you think? Could it be that the word itself is just fascinating to us? I mean, after all, it starts with the word in, as in somehow we'll be in the in crowd. And then it has the word nova in it, which means new, which suggests somehow that we're going to be on the cutting edge. And then it has something that I think all of us really want in life, which is innovation when we do it right. So we have this fascination and love of, sorry, just catching up to me there. And so it's hip and it's happening. It releases our dopamine levels. It reminds us of the, well, depending on which generation is in the room, either the 60s or the 70s and maybe even the 80s, sort of our days of experimentation, shall we say. But I've been wondering about whether or not all of us truly do love innovation. After all, there are those establishment squares, those who are really not into new things, who don't really want things to change very much, who kind of think, ugh, enough of that. Let's immigrate those people away from here. And then I started to think, do we really know who those people are? And could it quite possibly be us, you and I, not loving it as much as we think we do? How could that be, you're wondering? You are, aren't you? Who let her up on that stage? I'm offended by that idea. After all, I am an innovation guru. I came here. I have my TEDx badge to prove it. And I start the story of this talk really with that phrase. I am offended by this idea. I said that on purpose. If we are angered by ideas, rejecting ideas, ashamed by ideas, and unwilling to take them on, then aren't we really saying that we're not very open to innovation? Because at its very core, whether we talk about technology or social or all the cool little flavors of it, isn't innovation fundamentally about an idea? And so shouldn't we be open to it? Now, what I'm describing is entirely human to reject and push against, because of course change is hard. An idea that might change us in innovation would suggest that we might have to change. So that explains to some degree why we humans might go, not so much. Or maybe on my own terms, might I disrupt myself? So I started to think about the power of ideas and whether or not we're as open to them as we think we are. And this journey started many years ago. So I've been doing work with major companies. I'll name a few just to kind of give some context. So I worked at Apple, I worked at Autodesk, I worked at a little company called Go Live as VP of Sales and Marketing in the early days of the web. I worked with great companies like Nokia and Adobe and HP and just some really, really fun and fascinating companies. And I somewhat took for granted that everybody could be great at ideas. And if we just took sort of smart people and maybe this kind of creative ambiance and setting, we could sponsor innovation. And I published a book that was around how do people drive innovation collaboratively within their organization. And it was really then that I started to get the fact that I had no frickin' clue about what I was talking about. Because here's what happened. I went out and did about 100 talks last year, all across the country, mostly in the US and Canada. And it was at firms that you would recognize, or conferences you would recognize, and every single group asked the same darn question. And the first one I kind of swatted away, and the next one, so it took me a little while to kind of get there was a pattern in the question. And the question was, am I allowed here? And the question, if it was coming from, let's say, a 20-something, sounded different than it came from someone else. But if it was a 20-something saying it, it would be like, I'm really not sure this company wants my opinion here. They certainly don't seek it out, and when I give it, they kind of tell me to shut the heck up. And if it was a 50-something sort of management type, it sounded similar but different in that it said, I don't really know if I want their ideas here. I mean, why would I? Because after all, more ideas just means my life gets more complex. So why would I want that? And I started to ask myself, besides the fact, it took me 99 talks or something to kind of really get a clue as to what this question was, about do we deny the power of ideas? As much as we have this love affection and we say, oh, we want to take it home, we want to be innovators, do we actually give power to ideas? And so what I want to do is just kind of talk about that a little bit in sort of 3 different specific ways in which I think we may or may not, and I'll leave it to you to kind of decide what your own answer is. So the first place I want to start was that sort of question about, am I allowed? Am I allowed? And it reminded me of the movie Ratatouille. Now, some of you know I have a little one in my life, which gives me plenty of permission to watch as many children's movies as I want, which, by the way, if you have any children, this is a great thing to take advantage of. And in this movie, a rat has the audacity to believe that he can be a great chef. And other chefs go, no, not so much. Even his own family is like, not so much. And I wondered if in our own work setting, if we're actually saying to ourselves, you must fit in. You must conform to what our definition is of who is allowed to play. You must fit in. Conform to our understanding of what is allowed, rather than to stand out. And yet, if you kind of think about what drives all great innovation, is it the fact that we see the world entirely the same? No. It's not that we see the world as it is. We see the world as it could be, unique to our own experience, unique to our own understanding of the world. And it's our crazy way of actually understanding the world that lets us go, imagine a future where we could do Twitter, or we could create Priuses, or we could fix the Domino's pizza recipe, or all the other things that we might imagine, for us, whatever that looks like for us. And so some of us think normal is good, but has normal ever led to innovation? And yet, isn't that quite a bit of what we do in our own management approaches and the way we look at each other and go, boy, do you fit in? Do you fit in? Do I fit in? There's been research that says 60% of our conversation, our internal dialogue that we're having with ourselves is about whether or not we fit in. Boy, that seems like a lot of wasted energy, doesn't it? And so that led me to even another question, which is, if we deny who is allowed, do we also deny what idea is allowed? Do we effectively say, some ideas, yep, they're let in, but other ideas, not so much? And I found this fascinating piece of research around how our brain works that helped explain this to me. And basically, our brain works like a security guard, sort of waving through all the people they've seen over the last 5 years with the badge. And it kind of asks all the people who are sort of strange or new to park it on one side. And if our brain truly does do that, then doesn't it also leave us blind to the very thing that we might need to see in order for us to innovate our own lives, the places we work, society's problems? And could it be that all the things that we've been conditioned to over time, that were once true, that are no longer true, that's actually part of our current day history? For example, we used to think there was a time when smoking was sexy, right? I mean, just kind of think back. You can actually remember those ads and thinking, ooh, smoking, sexy. And there was a time when we didn't believe black people should have equal rights. There was a time when we believed women shouldn't vote. There was a probably a bunch of people who believe women should not be allowed on corporate boards because they only represent 10% of the current seats when they represent at least 60% of the buying power. Could be a modern day bias. Our brains have bias. If we accept that that's the way our brain works, then we may want to think about what's the curtains or the aperture that we can open up. Because if 80% is all about automated, how do we at least shift that part of us that would maybe let us see? If we're always following the people on Twitter that reflect the same points of view as we already own, well, we feel pretty smart, but are we really learning anything? And recently I learned that both Facebook and Google are doing something that helps this thing that we do on bias and takes it one step further. And some of you might have heard about it because it's starting to get some early press. Eli Perisner, and I hope I'm saying his name right, has written a book, it's coming out soon or is just about out, called The Filter Bubble. And basically what Google's doing is if you always, let's say, click on funny cat videos, and people who only read the New York Times, if you only sort of read the same things that your friends read, that after a while in your Facebook feed, all the people whose opinion is sort of different than yours that you never click on, they will start to be eliminated from your feed. So if your friends don't believe in gay marriage, and you never click on that thing, you're never going to understand that divergent point of view. So what they've done for us so kindly is to take that echo chamber that our brain does and sort of automate it for us, which is both scary and scary to me. Because it means we will continue to be blind. And yet, if we really love innovation, we can't afford to be blind, can we? And so the third area, we talked about the who, maybe we deny power to the who, and maybe we deny power to new ideas. I think there's something else that most of us do, and we kind of know we do it. We're kind of chagrined that we do it, but we do it anyway, which is this third way of how we hold ideas. Do we hold them in such a way that the idea can be big, built upon by other ideas, and scale so the idea can grow? And the way I kind of think about it is when I go to a meeting, am I holding the idea sort of like this? I brought you a great idea. You can't even see it. It's caught up so tightly. And maybe if I opened it a little bit, you could see it a little better if you kind of peek around the corners. But I certainly don't necessarily hold it like this, where you could pick it up, and you could make it your own, and you could build on it. And I wonder what that limits us to. Because, when we hold on to things, it may be brilliant, but it's rarely ever big. And more importantly, it's rarely ever owned by other people. So an idea, if I can make it big, is limited to whatever idea I can create. But if we could create an idea that we could believe in, and build together, then ultimately we might be able to create something much bigger, much better, maybe solve some of those social problems we see outside our door. And there are businesses today who are starting to take this concept of sharing and take it to an all-new level. So Kickstarter is a really fun one that many people have. Have any of you guys already used it? This whole notion of curating your audience so that they can actually help you build an album or a piece of art, right? And then there's been a wonderful notion of Zipcar, which is really popular in the city, where you don't have to own a depreciating commodity because we can own it, and that asset can be shared. And my own personal understanding of doing strategy and innovation, the stuff I've done for years in the business world, is really about how to let people own something. And in Egypt, we saw that idea play out on the social scale, right? We saw so many people create a peaceful revolution, and it was no one's idea and everyone's idea. And I think in America, what's interesting to me is how many people actually kind of look at that and go, well, yeah, sure they did. Cool. But the idea of democracy that we hold true fits into that bucket of it's a good idea. So it doesn't occur to us that what they just did is radically, radically different for their understanding of the world. And because I grew up Islamic, I happen to really understand how rare that concept is that we could create something that we will then participate in a community. And they did it peacefully, which is still this amazing concept. If you look at the Middle East, they're the first that has ever done it peacefully. It's beautiful. Power of curation. So I've come to this understanding that the future is not this thing we create, meaning I don't create the future, we create the future. I don't create innovation, we create innovation. I don't create change, we create change. Perhaps you believe that too. And if we are to take this to the next level, then we have to think about what is the culture we're creating. Could be the culture in our family. Could be the culture at work. Are we saying everyone can play? Are we saying we'll be open to new ideas and look at things without bias? At least figure out how to open up that aperture. Will we figure out how to hold an idea like this so that someone else might pick it up and help build on it? I certainly hope so. Because you know that idea of all these human things, it's not to say that we have to overcome our own humanity, it's that we need to recognize our own humanity. Because if we truly love innovation the way we say we do, then we also ought to love the things we need to grow. And I believe we can. I believe that the innovators that we look and we celebrate, the Steve Jobs or choose your own, there are so many that we can point to, right? Great innovators in our life. It's not that they are without bias. It's that they figured out how to open up that aperture just a little bit more than the rest of us. And if we could find a way to take that one nugget home, then we might be able to do the same. And that would be an idea that might change innovation, worthy of innovation. Thank you.